Earth was a dying planet. Once a thriving hub of interstellar colonies and trade, it had fallen into obscurity after the Galactic Council deemed it too backward to be of value. Its advanced technology, once deemed cutting edge, was now old and forgotten. The rest of the galaxy had moved on, leaving humanity behind, abandoned on its own homeworld. In the midst of this isolation, Captain Selena Darvis, leader of a ragtag group of survivors, had spent years searching the Earth's remnants for anything useful, tools, weapons, scraps of old tech, to keep humanity's last hope alive. Earth's remaining population had been reduced to a scattered few, living in makeshift cities built underground and in the ruins of the once great metropolises. Selena's crew, engineers, soldiers, and scientists, had learned to survive by scavenging the planet's forgotten corners, but their resources were dwindling. The desperation was palpable when Selena's crew uncovered a new lead. An old military archive, buried beneath miles of rubble in what was once the New York City sector, held a map, an ancient, incomprehensible map that led to something more. A bunker deep underground, sealed for millennia. The coordinates were unclear, but the promise of something extreme in the text they deciphered was enough to ignite a spark of hope. Selena stood on the edge of a collapsed skyscraper, looking out over the desolate landscape. The world outside her group's hideout was harsh enough that even the animals had either mutated or gone extinct. But the ruins of once great cities were now a graveyard of memories, and yet this map, this cryptic hint, could be the key to turning the tide. It had to be. "We're running out of time," Selena muttered, as she looked back at her team. "We need to get to it before the Xerok." Her words hit the crew hard. They had been hearing rumors for months now. Whispers of an alien fleet approaching the solar system. A fleet led by the Xerok, a ruthless empire known for eradicating entire species. There had been no communication, only the deep sense of impending doom. The fleet was getting closer, and their first strikes would likely wipe out what was left of humanity in a matter of days. The mission was set into motion. Led by Selena, the crew of 10 embarked on a perilous journey across what remained of the East Coast, navigating through underground passageways and avoiding dangerous wildlife. They had no choice but to brave the wilderness, armed with nothing but what they could carry. It was a grim and dangerous trek, but hope fueled them. If the bunker held what they thought it did, they could have a chance at surviving the oncoming storm. 3 days of travel brought them to the entrance of a forgotten military complex, buried deep beneath the earth. The structure, once an enormous underground fortress, was now largely abandoned. The door to the bunker, however, was still sealed tightly. It took them hours to breach its defenses, ancient systems that were now failing but still potent enough to keep most intruders at bay. As they finally entered, a deep, resounding hum echoed throughout the chamber. The sound of something alive. The air inside was cold, stagnant, and thick with the scent of rust. But as they moved deeper into the facility, they discovered a room unlike anything they had seen before. A massive chamber filled with ancient machines and glowing symbols, some of which flickered to life as they entered. At the center of the room lay a large, cylindrical structure, its surface covered in alien symbols. This, Selena realized, was no ordinary weapon. "What is this?" one of her engineers, Josa, muttered, stepping forward to touch the surface. The moment his hand made contact, the machine hummed louder, and a holographic projection sprang to life in the center of the room, revealing a map of the galaxy. But it was different. Strange, jagged lines marked borders that had no place in modern maps. The message that followed was cryptic, seemingly encoded, "The Forsaken Line." It was a phrase that seemed to resonate through the room. Selena's breath caught in her throat. "This is it. This is what we've been searching for," she said, staring at the strange, pulsating structure. The weapon, or whatever it was, felt ancient but potent. They had uncovered something humanity's enemies had overlooked. Could this be Earth's last chance? And then, as if the universe was reminding them how little time they had, a warning came. A voice, distorted but unmistakable, crackled over their comms. Warning, the Xerok are here. The message sent a chill down Selena's spine. The Xerok were here. Her eyes darted to the blinking lights on the communications console. The alien fleet was entering Earth's orbit, fast, too fast for a conventional defense to hold. Time was running out. The Forsaken Line, the weapon they had just discovered, was humanity's last hope, but they had no idea what it truly could do, let alone how to activate it. "We need to get to work," Selena said, her voice firm, though her hands trembled. "Joza, see if you can get a read on the control interface. Everyone else, set up a perimeter. We can't afford to be caught off guard." As her team scrambled into action, Selena stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on the glowing holographic map in the center of the room. It displayed the solar system, but the lines, those jagged, unnatural edges, marked borders that seemed foreign, as if they belonged to a galaxy far older and far more dangerous than the one humanity knew. There was something ancient here, something that had been lying dormant for eons, waiting for the right moment to awaken. But would it be enough to stop the oncoming storm? "Selena, we're getting something," Joza called out, his voice tinged with disbelief. She rushed over, her boots clanging against the metal floor. Joza was standing at a control terminal, his fingers flying over the console, trying to decipher the alien interface. "It's not much, but I've unlocked a few commands. The interface is responsive to human touch," Joza said, though his expression was one of confusion. "This technology, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's alive. Whatever the Forsaken Line is, it's not a traditional weapon." "Can it fight the Xerok?" Selena asked, her voice growing tight with urgency. I don't know yet," Joza replied, his eyes glued to the screen. "But there's one thing I can tell for sure. This is more than just a weapon. It's a defense system designed to keep something out or destroy something in. Then let's activate it." "Now," Selena ordered, her patience wearing thin. As Joza continued his work, the rest of the crew set up makeshift defenses in the facility, using salvaged weapons and old tech to form a temporary perimeter. They knew it wouldn't hold for long. Humanity's last remaining defenses were nothing compared to the overwhelming might of the Xerok. And as each hour passed, the fleet drew closer, its sensors and reconnaissance ships scanning the planet, likely already aware of the human presence. The clock was ticking. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Kara Chang, one of Selena's most trusted soldiers. "We've got incoming. Several dropships are on their way to the surface." Selena's heart raced. The Xerok were preparing for ground assault. They had expected the resistance to be weak, but now that they had discovered something significant, the invasion was accelerating. "We'll hold them off as long as we can," Kara continued, "but we need the weapon online or we're finished." Selena nodded grimly, turning back to Joza. "How much longer?" He shook his head, his fingers trembling over the console. "It's not responding the way it should. I think there's something missing, a key component that's needed to fully activate it." "Something that?" "Something that needs a human touch," Selena finished, her mind racing. She realized the truth in that moment. The weapon, this ancient technology, was likely attuned to a human life force. She had seen the way the holographic interface pulsed and responded to Joja's touch. It had recognized something about humanity. "We can't wait any longer," Selena said. "Find whatever you need to finish this. We have minutes, maybe seconds, before the Xerok land." At that moment, the sound of rumbling from outside echoed through the walls of the bunker. The Xerok were closer now, their ground forces already preparing to breach the facility. Selena's mind raced. The Forsaken Line was their only hope, but its secrets were still buried in layers of alien encryption. If they didn't unlock it soon, humanity would be wiped out. She made a snap decision, one that would alter the course of everything. I'm going in, she said, stepping toward the center of the chamber. If this thing needs a human sacrifice to activate, I'll be the one to do it. Captain, no, Joza protested, but Selena was already moving toward the interface. We don't know what it'll do to you. I'll take that risk, she said, her voice hard with resolve. We don't have time to debate. This is our only shot. With that, Selena placed her hand on the console. The moment her skin made contact with the surface, the hum of the chamber intensified, and the walls around her began to shift. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and a pulse of energy shot through her body, searing with the intensity of 1,000 electric volts. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stay conscious as the energy surged. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. A low, reverberating voice echoed through the chamber, ancient and distorted, speaking in a language that Selena couldn't understand. But the meaning was clear. The Forsaken line had chosen her. It was ready. The moment Selena's hand made contact with the Forsaken line's core, the world around her exploded into light. Her body was flooded with energy, the kind that felt like it was seeping into her very bones, every cell in her body vibrating with a power she had never imagined possible. She gasped, eyes wide, struggling to focus as the room around her twisted and shifted. The interface wasn't just a machine. It was alive, and now, so was she. She could feel its pulse in her veins, its cold, calculating consciousness brushing against her mind. A voice, not human, but somehow familiar, echoed inside her head. The line is awake. The Guardian has been chosen. Selena gritted her teeth, trying to hold on to her thoughts. The voice was too overwhelming, too alien. But then, something else pierced through the fog of confusion. A low rumble, growing louder. The sound of impact. The ground shook beneath her feet, the tremor carrying through the walls like a warning bell. The Xerok were here. Captain, you okay? Josha's voice broke through the haze, frantic. I'm fine, Selena said, her voice shaky but determined. She tore her hand from the interface, staggering back as her mind cleared. The power coursing through her was immense, but it was also dangerous, too unpredictable. I've activated it, but it's not what I expected. Before she could explain further, the building was rocked by a thunderous explosion from above. The Xerok had arrived in full force. Incoming, Kara shouted, her voice sharp with urgency as the team rushed to battle stations. They're dropping in, Captain. We've got 5 minutes, tops, before they breach the main doors. Selena wiped her brow, her thoughts racing. The Forsaken line had responded to her, but the connection was unstable. If she couldn't harness its power, they would all be destroyed. But the Xerok were already here, and it was clear they wouldn't give humanity a second chance. Joja, can you get it to respond? We need something, anything to slow them down, Selena ordered. Josha's fingers flew over the console, sweat pouring down his face. I'm trying, but this isn't like anything we've ever seen. The machine, it needs a catalyst. There's a component missing, something essential to fully activate it. Without it, we're just playing with fire. Then we'll improvise, Selena said, grabbing a rifle from a nearby rack. We hold them off as long as we can. We're not going down without a fight. The first wave of Xerok forces slammed into the bunker with brutal efficiency. Massive, armored warships thundered overhead, their weapons shaking the walls as the first dropships deployed troops onto the surface. From the underground facility's observation window, Selena saw the alien soldiers, tall, fearsome creatures with jagged, insect-like armor, marching toward them in perfect formation, their plasma rifles aimed at the entrance. We'll hold them here, Kara said, her voice calm but grim. But we need that weapon online now. With each blast from the aliens' weapons, the walls of the facility groaned and cracked. The Xerok were relentless, their forces overwhelming. The humans fought back with everything they had. Gunfire echoed through the corridors, grenades detonated in blinding flashes, and the air was thick with smoke and chaos. But it was clear they were outmatched. Even with their best efforts, they couldn't stop the oncoming storm. Selena ran to the center of the chamber, her breath heavy, her pulse pounding in her ears. The Forsaken line was waiting, silent and still. But she could feel its power now, almost like it was beckoning her. She had to trust it. It was the only way. "Jota," she shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "Is there any way to force the system to trigger anything?" Jota paused for a moment, glancing nervously at the control panel. "There's a fail-safe mechanism, but we'd have to feed it energy, more energy than we've ever seen. We'd need to reroute power from the entire facility, and that could be catastrophic. We don't have a choice. Do it." Jota didn't hesitate. His fingers flew across the terminal, rerouting every ounce of available energy into the core. The entire building trembled as the power surged. The walls around them hummed to life, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The Forsaken line responded, its eerie, alien hum rising in pitch. Selena felt her chest tighten as the power coursed through her once more. The weapon, this ancient, dormant force, was waking up, just as she had. But the connection was still unstable. She could sense the weapon's intelligence, cold and calculating, trying to adapt to her presence. It wanted to destroy, but also to protect. It was a weapon, yes, but it was something more. And then, just as the first wave of Xerox soldiers breached the outer defenses, a pulse of energy erupted from the Forsaken line. The ground split open, and beams of pure energy shot into the sky, vaporizing the enemy forces in a single blinding flash. The Xerox were momentarily stunned, but it wasn't enough to end the battle. The weapon's power was vast, but not infinite, and the true challenge had just begun. The blast from the Forsaken line had been devastating, obliterating the first wave of Xerox soldiers with a ferocity that left the bunker's walls shaking. The alien forces reeled, but they didn't retreat. They adapted quickly, regrouping and launching a counterattack, their battle-hardened instincts kicking in. Selena, her breath ragged from the overwhelming surge of energy she had just channeled, stumbled backward as she tried to regain her composure. The weapon's pulse still hummed through her, every nerve alive with its strange alien energy. But as the chaos outside continued to escalate, she realized something was wrong, something deeper than just the immediate fight. "Jota," Selena gasped, clutching the console, "I can feel it. The weapon, it's changing me." Jota didn't answer immediately. He was too busy trying to stabilize the console's readings, sweat dripping from his forehead as he worked furiously. "I don't know what's happening, Captain," he said finally, his voice tinged with fear. "The weapon's power, it's not just unlocking new functions. It's resonating with you, like it's sensing with your physiology." Selena's mind was racing. She could feel the weapon pushing against her thoughts, an almost symbiotic presence, not just a tool of war, but a living force trying to control her. The power it offered was intoxicating, but there was something off about it, something that felt as if it was tugging at her very humanity. She couldn't trust it, but she also couldn't stop it. Then, a sudden realization hit her. "It's not just attuning to me," she murmured, eyes widening with realization. "It's choosing. There's someone else it's picking. It's not me, it's Kieran." Kieran Volk, the young engineer who had joined their crew only a few months before, stood to the side, observing the chaos unfolding. His dark eyes were filled with a mixture of awe and fear, unsure of his place in the whirlwind of events. He had always been a quiet, reserved member of the team, smart, resourceful, but never one for heroics. Still, Selena had always seen something in him, an untapped potential, though she had never guessed it might be this. Kieran had been one of the first to touch the Forsaken line during their initial investigation of the bunker, and though he hadn't felt the same overwhelming surge that Selena had, there was something about his presence that seemed to stir the ancient machine. "Selena, what's happening?" Kieran asked, his voice anxious as he stepped toward her. "It's you," she whispered. "The weapon, it's chosen you." Kieran's brows furrowed in confusion. What do you mean, chosen me? But before she could explain further, Joza interrupted, his voice frantic. Captain, I'm losing control of the power flow. The Forsaken line is stabilizing, but it's not responding to me anymore. It's responding to Kieran now. The atmosphere in the room shifted, a strange energy thickening in the air. Kieran stepped forward cautiously, a look of uncertainty in his eyes. The Forsaken line pulsed again, but this time, the energy felt more directed, more focused. As Kieran placed his hand on the console, a sharp crack of light erupted from the center of the chamber. For a brief moment, time seemed to stretch. The room was alive with energy, the air crackling as Kieran was engulfed by the weapon's strange alien aura. He gasped as the power surged through him, unlike anything he had ever experienced. His body tensed and he staggered, barely holding himself upright. Stay with me, Kieran, Selena called, rushing to his side. But Kieran was no longer entirely himself. His eyes had turned an unnatural shade of silver, glowing with a strange energy. His breath was shallow, and his body trembled under the sheer force coursing through him. I don't understand it, Kieran whispered, his voice strained. It's like the weapon is inside me. I can hear it, feel it, everything. Selena's heart raced as she watched him struggle. She had hoped that the weapon's power would be an asset, something to help them defeat the Xerok. But now, as Kieran seemed to lose himself in the weapon's grasp, she feared it was consuming him instead. Kieran, you have to fight it, she shouted, gripping his shoulders. This isn't you. The weapon, it's manipulating you. Kieran's silver eyes flickered with recognition, but only for a moment. The connection between him and the Forsaken line was overwhelming. He could hear the ancient voices now, the fragmented memories of a long-dead civilization speaking to him. They spoke of war, of empires destroyed, of worlds torn apart, and they told him that his choice would decide the fate of the galaxy. Suddenly, Kieran's body tensed, and with a sharp intake of breath, he jerked away from Selena. No, I can't stop it. It's choosing me. The room fell into an eerie silence as Kieran's voice took on an unnatural tone. His hands glowed with energy, and the very air around him seemed to distort, as though reality itself were bending to his will. Captain, Joza whispered, eyes wide with fear, we've lost him. Selena's chest tightened. Kieran was no longer just a man. He was something else, something far more dangerous. And she was about to find out if humanity could survive whatever he had become. Kieran's transformation was swift and terrifying. The air in the chamber pulsed with a raw, almost tangible energy, as though the very atmosphere had been infected by the power now coursing through him. His silver eyes glowed brighter, and his hands crackled with raw energy, as if they could bend the laws of nature to his will. The Forsaken line had chosen him, but what it had made him into was still a mystery, and a dangerous one at that. Stay back, Selena shouted, raising her weapon, her voice sharp with fear. Her mind raced. Kieran was still in there somewhere, but he was no longer the person they had known. The weapon had taken control, and whatever remained of Kieran's humanity was slipping away. Kieran, she cried, her voice breaking. Fight it, don't let it control you. But Kieran, or whatever he had become, didn't respond. His lips were curled into a grimace, his teeth clenched as though struggling against an invisible force. The room vibrated with the growing intensity of the energy around him. It was as if the weapon, the ancient force within the Forsaken line, was seeking to merge with him completely. What's happening to him? Jozo whispered, staring at the scene in horror. He's not the same. We have to stop this, Selena said, her voice steely, though her hands shook. She couldn't shoot him, he was still Kieran, in some way, but they had no other choice. They had to break the weapon's hold over him before it was too late. As if in response to her thoughts, the machine at the center of the chamber hummed louder, its tendrils of energy extending outward, wrapping around Kieran's body like a living entity. A low, reverberating voice filled the room. An ancient language, alien and incomprehensible, but the meaning was clear. The Guardian has ascended. The line is restored. Selena's heart pounded in her chest. Kieran had become something more than human. He was now the Guardian, a vessel for the Forsaken Line's power. But at what cost? Could humanity survive this new, unstoppable force? Or had they just unleashed a weapon far beyond their control? Kieran, Selena shouted again, desperation in her voice. You don't have to do this. You're still in there. But Kieran's response was not the voice of her friend. Instead, it was the cold, distant tone of something alien. I am the line now. I am beyond your reach, Selena. Selena's blood ran cold. The words hit her like a blow to the chest. She wanted to reach out to him, to bring him back, but she knew that the Kieran she had known, the quiet, thoughtful engineer, was slipping away. Captain, Joza said, voice trembling, we can't hold the Xerok off much longer. Their forces are moving in, and we're sitting ducks in here with whatever Kieran's become. Selena's mind raced. The weapon, this Guardian, might be their last hope to stop the Xerok, but it was a double-edged sword. She couldn't afford to lose Kieran, but there was no time to hesitate. The Xerok fleet was coming, and they would never stop until every last human was wiped out. You're right, she said, her voice quiet but determined. We'll have to trust Kieran, and hope that he can control this power long enough to fight the Xerok. Kieran, or the Guardian now inhabiting his body, seemed to hear her words. His silver eyes flickered, and for just a moment, there was a spark of recognition in his gaze. Selena, the voice was softer, almost pained. I don't want this. I can't. But before he could finish, the chamber was rocked by another violent explosion. The Xerok had breached the outer defenses, and their forces were now pouring into the facility. The walls of the bunker trembled as the alien invaders advanced, their heavy footsteps echoing down the corridors. Captain, Kara shouted over the comms, we've got incoming. The Xerok are here in full force, and they're pushing through. We don't have long before they reach us. Selena turned to Kieran, her eyes pleading. We need you now, Kieran. We need the Guardian. Kieran's hands crackled with energy, the raw force within him intensifying. He looked at Selena, the remnants of his old self still flickering in his eyes. I'll try, Kieran said, his voice hoarse. And then, as though summoned by his words, the energy surrounding him exploded outward, a wave of destructive force that reverberated through the facility. The Xerok soldiers who had been advancing toward the main chamber were instantly obliterated by the shockwave, their bodies disintegrating into ash before they even had time to react. But Kieran didn't stop there. The Guardian, Kieran, reached out, his hands glowing with deadly intent, and with a snap of his fingers, the entire corridor before them was engulfed in a barrier of energy. The Xerok forces were trapped, their weapons useless against the sheer power that Kieran now wielded. Selena watched, a mixture of awe and horror on her face. Kieran, no, the Guardian, was unstoppable. But at what cost? Kieran, stop, she shouted, fear surging through her. This is too much. You'll destroy everything. But the Guardian, Kieran, didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward her, his expression cold, his eyes still glowing with alien power. And in that moment, Selena knew that whatever Kieran had been, whatever humanity he had left, was slipping away completely. The atmosphere in the bunker was suffocating, the air thick with the residual energy of the battle. The Xerok had been decimated in a single overwhelming wave of power, their once advanced weapons completely useless against the Guardian. The entire corridor had been obliterated, a barrier of energy pulsing like a living wall, trapping the enemy forces in a bubble of annihilation. Yet even as the Xerok forces struggled against the wall of energy, Selena's heart was heavy with the knowledge of the price they were paying. Kieran, now the Guardian, stood at the center of it all, his silver eyes glowing with a cold alien fire. His hands crackled with power, the energy arcing through the air as if he could reshape reality itself. But his face was an empty mask, the remnants of his humanity fading with every passing moment. "Karen," Selena whispered, barely able to form the words. Her mind was clouded with fear, with uncertainty. The man she had known, the engineer who had fought beside them, was gone. In his place stood a force of unimaginable destruction, a force they had no idea how to control. The Guardian turned toward her slowly, his movements deliberate, almost mechanical. His lips parted as if to speak, but only silence came. Selena's heart pounded in her chest. Was this really Kieran? Was he still in there somewhere, trapped within the power of the Forsaken Line? She could feel the intense energy radiating from him, could almost hear the alien whispers that danced in the back of her mind. The weapon had taken control of him, and with it, a part of him had been lost. It wasn't just his physical form that had changed. He had become something else, something alien. The sound of distant explosions interrupted her thoughts. The Xeric had regrouped, sending a second wave of reinforcements to breach the facility. Selena could hear their guttural war cries, the unmistakable sounds of an unstoppable enemy growing ever closer. They were here to finish what they had started. "We don't have much time," Josiah said urgently, stepping toward her, his face a mask of grim determination. "The Xeric will breach the main chamber soon. If we don't do something, we're finished." Selena nodded, but her eyes never left Kieran. She couldn't afford to take her focus off him. The Guardian's power was overwhelming, but it was also unstable. She could feel it in the way the air crackled, in the way the wall seemed to bend beneath the pressure. Kieran, or whatever he had become, was struggling to contain it. "Selena." Kara's voice crackled over the comms, low and urgent. "We need that barrier down. Now, the Xeric are regrouping, and they're starting to flank us. We can't hold them off forever." The urgency in Kara's voice broke through Selena's haze of uncertainty. She had to act. The fate of her crew, of humanity itself, rested on what happened next. She glanced at Josiah, who was already working on the control panel, attempting to reroute power to the Forsaken Line to weaken the barrier. Selena took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Karen, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Come back to us." For a moment, there was nothing but silence, and then a flicker. A spark of recognition in Kieran's eyes. His expression shifted, just for an instant, a flash of the man he had been. She felt it, a brief connection that sent a jolt through her heart. But then the moment was gone, replaced by the cold, emotionless gaze of the Guardian. "No," Kieran's voice rang out, deeper, resonating with power. "I am beyond your reach, Selena. I am the line." The words were final, absolute. He wasn't coming back. The Guardian had fully assumed control, and with it, the power to decide the fate of everyone in the room. "We can't stop this, can we?" Josiah said quietly, his voice tinged with resignation. "It's too powerful, too far gone." Selena shook her head. "We can't give up. Not yet." The sound of the Xeric forces pounding at the door grew louder. Selena turned to the control panel, where Jojo was still desperately trying to regain control over the energy flow. They had one shot at this. If they didn't neutralize Kieran's connection to the Forsaken Line, if they didn't sever his link to the weapon, the Guardian would be unstoppable. But how could they do that? The weapon had fused with him. He was no longer just a man. He was part of something ancient, something beyond human comprehension. "Kieran," Selena said again, her voice pleading. "Please, this isn't you. You have to fight it." This time, the Guardian flinched. His body trembled as the raw power within him surged. For a brief moment, Selena saw the struggle in his eyes, the man he had been trying to reach out through the veil of energy that surrounded him. I can't," Kieran whispered, his voice barely audible, shaking with the weight of the power that gripped him. "It's too much. I can't stop it. I can't." The walls of the bunker shook again, and Selena knew time was running out. She had to make a decision. There was no more time for hesitation. They could either destroy the Forsaken Line's power and Kieran along with it, or they could embrace the weapon, hoping the Guardian could help them win the war. But at what cost? The chamber was a battlefield, the hum of the Forsaken Line reverberating in the air like a heartbeat, a pulse of power that threatened to consume everything. Kieran, or the Guardian now inhabiting his body, stood at the center of it all, his silver eyes glowing with a cold, alien intensity. The barrier around him still crackled with energy, trapping the Xeric forces in a prison of destruction, but the sound of their war cries, guttural and relentless, grew louder with each passing moment. Selena's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at Kieran, her breath shallow. There was still a flicker of something human in him, something she could see in the brief moments when the power subsided, when the Guardian's mask slipped just enough for her to catch a glimpse of the man he had been. "Please," she whispered, taking a step toward him. "Kieran, fight this. You can still come back to us." The Guardian didn't answer immediately. His hands were raised before him, crackling with deadly energy. The power was overwhelming, and she could feel it pushing against her chest like a physical force. He was fighting it, she realized. Kieran was still in there, buried beneath the weight of the weapon, but it wasn't enough. The power was too much, too consuming. The Guardian was slipping further away, its influence growing stronger by the second. "We don't have much time." Josha's voice broke through the tension, his tone tight with anxiety. He was still working at the control panel, but every few seconds, sparks flew from it, and the readings went haywire. "The Xeric are breaking through. We can't hold them off with the barrier forever. We need to decide, now." Selena's mind raced. They were trapped. The Forsaken Line was their only hope of survival, but it was also their greatest threat. Kieran was the key. He could either save them or doom them all. "I'm not giving up on him," Selena said firmly, though her voice was filled with uncertainty. She couldn't lose Kieran, not like this. He had always been one of them, a trusted member of their crew. She wouldn't abandon him to the alien power that had consumed him. "There's still a chance. I know it." Josha met her gaze, his expression conflicted, but he didn't argue. There was no room for doubt anymore. It was time to act. "All right, but we need to hurry," Joseph said. "The Xeric are nearly on us, and we have no way of knowing how much longer Kieran can keep the barrier up before the weapon takes full control." Selena's mind flashed back to the moment when Kieran had first touched the Forsaken Line. She remembered the look of awe on his face, the way he had seemed to resonate with the power, as though it called to him. And now, here they were, at the precipice, with the entire fate of humanity hanging in the balance. She took another step toward Kieran, her hand outstretched, her voice soft but steady. "Kieran, I know you're still in there. You have to fight it. You're stronger than this. Remember who you are. Remember us." For a long moment, there was only silence. The Guardian's eyes flickered, but the silver glow remained, brighter than before. Selena's heart clenched, the fear and hope mingling within her. But then, a tremor passed through Kieran's body, and his voice, barely audible, reached her ears. I don't know if I can." His words were strained, torn between the force within him and the human part of him that was fighting to surface. It's too powerful. I can't." She could see the anguish in his eyes, the conflict that raged within him. This wasn't just about stopping the Xeric anymore. It was about saving the man he had once been. Selena wasn't sure how much longer Kieran could hold onto his humanity, but she couldn't give up on him. Not now. "Fight, Kieran," she said, her voice steady despite the fear threatening to overwhelm her. "You are stronger than this. You always were." But as if in response to her words, the Guardian lifted one hand, the power surging with a violent crackle. The very air seemed to warp as energy cascaded from his fingertips, and Selena was forced to step back, the intensity of the power nearly knocking her off her feet. The Guardian's expression didn't change, but she could see it now. Kieran was struggling, his will bending beneath the force. Then, just as she thought all hope was lost, something changed. A single tear slipped down Kieran's cheek, his lips trembling with the weight of the weapon that had consumed him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely a breath. And then, without warning, the energy around him surged outward, the barrier collapsing. The Zuruk forces, still trapped by the force, were caught in the wave of energy, their weapons disintegrating, their bodies reduced to nothing before they could even react. The remaining Zuruk in the vicinity were scattered, thrown against walls, knocked unconscious by the shockwave. But the power didn't stop there. It radiated outward, threatening to engulf the entire facility, threatening to tear apart everything in its path. "Do it!" Kieran shouted, his voice full of desperation. "End it, before it consumes me completely." "Hold on," Selena screamed as she ran toward him, but the energy was too much. The Guardian's power was going critical. There was no time left. Selena made her choice. The energy pulsing from the Guardian was a living thing, a force that seemed to claw at the very fabric of reality. It was more than power. It was a wild, uncontrolled storm that threatened to tear the bunker apart, to erase everything in its path. The Zuruk were scattered, their forces obliterated in the wake of Kieran's sacrifice, but the cost was clear. The Guardian was no longer just a weapon. It was a force beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, and it was slipping beyond anyone's control. "Do it! End it!" Kieran screamed, his voice ragged with desperation. The power around him crackled violently, threatening to swallow him whole. His body trembled as the energy surged, his face contorted in agony. Selena could see it now. He was fighting, but he couldn't hold on much longer. The Guardian was overpowering him, pulling him deeper into its grasp with every passing second. The choice was clear, but it was the hardest decision Selena had ever faced. The Guardian was humanity's last hope against the Zuruk, but it had come at a terrible cost. Kieran was losing himself, his humanity slipping away with every surge of power. "Kieran!" Selena's voice cracked. She stepped closer, her heart torn between the man she had known and the force that had consumed him. "I'm sorry, I have to do this." Kieran's eyes flickered, a brief moment of recognition before the silver glow overtook them once again. "Please, I can't. I don't want to lose myself." "I know," Selena whispered, her voice trembling. "But we don't have a choice. You've already saved us. Now you need to be free." Joshua's voice crackled over the comms, distant and urgent. "Captain, you've got to hurry. The Zuruk reinforcements are close. We can't hold them off much longer." Selena's mind raced. The Guardian was powerful, too powerful. If she didn't act now, the energy would tear the entire bunker apart. There was only one way to stop it. She reached for the device at her waist, a small, unassuming piece of technology that Kieran had designed, the fail-safe. It was meant to shut down the power source of the Forsaken line, to sever the connection between the weapon and its host. But it was risky. If the Guardian resisted, the backlash could destroy them all. "I'm sorry, Kieran," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I can't lose you to this." With trembling hands, Selena activated the fail-safe. A soft click resonated through the room as the device powered up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air around Kieran seemed to ripple, the energy fluctuating violently. He let out a guttural cry as the force within him screamed against the disruption. "No!" The Guardian roared, its voice shaking the walls. "You cannot control this. You are nothing before the line." The power surged once more, crackling and arsing through the chamber like a living thing. But then there was a moment of stillness. The energy faltered, like a dying star flickering one last time before fading into darkness. Kieran's body convulsed, his arms thrown wide as if in defiance, but slowly the glow in his eyes began to fade. His breath became shallow, labored. He collapsed to his knees, the overwhelming energy ebbing away, leaving him as he had been, just a man, broken and battered. "Selena," Kieran whispered, his voice weak, barely audible. His eyes fluttered, and for a moment, she thought he might slip away. But he reached out, grasping her hand with the last strength he had. "I'm sorry, I couldn't." "Sheh," Selena whispered, kneeling beside him. She placed a hand on his forehead, brushing away the sweat that had gathered there. "You did more than enough. You saved us." Kieran's lips parted in a faint, bittersweet smile. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He trailed off, his grip loosening. His body slumped forward, and for a moment, Selena thought he had slipped into unconsciousness. But then he looked up one last time, his eyes meeting hers with a clarity she hadn't seen in so long. "I'm proud of you, Selena," he said softly. You've always been the strongest of us." And then, with that final breath, Kieran was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. The air was heavy with the weight of the decision they had made, the sacrifice that had been necessary to stop the Guardian from consuming everything. The failsafe had worked, but at what cost? Kieran was lost, and the weapon was no more. But humanity had survived. The Xerok would be stopped, for now. But the war was far from over. Selena sat there for a moment, her mind numb, her heart breaking. She had known the risks, but she hadn't been prepared for the price. She had saved her crew, saved humanity, but in the process, she had lost the man she had trusted more than anyone. The power of the Forsaken line had been shattered, but in doing so, it had taken Kieran with it. The doors to the chamber exploded open, and Kara, Josiah, and the others rushed in, weapons drawn, only to stop when they saw Selena kneeling by Kieran's body. "We did it, Captain," Josiah asked, his voice laced with exhaustion but hopeful. "We stopped them." Selena nodded slowly, her eyes wet with unshed tears. "Yes, but it came at a terrible price.